Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the source material you send us, really get into it, and pull out those brilliant, actionable insights, sometimes the ones everyone else missed. Today, we're digging into underestimated geniuses, their quiet rise to power. And our mission here is, well, it's pretty fascinating. We want to find those hidden patterns, the traits of minds who really changed things, but maybe didn't get the credit right away. Sometimes it took years, even centuries. We're kind of challenging that whole idea of instant genius.
Exactly. And the core idea from the sources is, well, it's a bit provocative, isn't it? What if the biggest names, the ones you learned about, aren't the whole story? What if they aren't even the most impactful ones in the long run? The analysis really pushes this idea that truly revolutionary concepts, they don't often burst onto the scene. They tend to simmer quietly. They get dismissed, misunderstood by the people around them at the time, and only later, sometimes much later, do they really explode and just reshape how we see everything.
Right. So forget the standard textbook heroes for a moment. We're looking at how influence actually builds silently. And it's not just about history, like Mendel or, Tesla. The sources say this is happening right now.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. If they're not chasing the spotlight, where are these people? What makes a modern, underestimated genius tick?
The sources are pretty clear they're active today, often in really disruptive fields. We're talking AI, right? Sustainable tech, maybe space exploration, people working behind the scenes, the silent revolutionaries among us. And what's really interesting is when you synthesize the traits identified in the material, it's not just one thing. It's a specific combination that lets them sort of operate under the radar. There seem to be three core elements, and it's how they connect that matters. So first, yeah, that relentless curiosity, that's almost a given, you could say. But second, this powerful, really unwavering long-term vision. We're not talking a 5-year business plan here, no. This is more like a 20-year quest for something fundamental. And the third thing, and this is absolutely critical, it's like their armor. A deep, genuine lack of interest in immediate fame or those quick financial wins. They're not after the headline.
Not the next funding round.
Exactly. They don't need that external pat on the back, and that lets them keep going when everyone else is saying, that's crazy, it'll never work.
That part, the disregard for the immediate payoff, that feels really key. It almost suggests the biggest hurdle isn't the science or the tech itself. It's more about the social consensus, the way we're all incentivized for short-term results.
Precisely. I mean, think about it. If they needed peer approval, they'd have to water down their ideas.
Right.
It makes them fit the current mold. But because they're driven by the problem itself or proving some core theory, they can actually withstand potentially decades of being ignored or isolated professionally. They want the knowledge, not the market share, at least initially.
Okay, but hold on. If their ideas are just dismissed by almost everyone, how do we know they aren't just, stubborn, maybe pursuing a dead end? How do the sources distinguish between that real productive persistence and just folly?
That's a really good question, a crucial distinction. And the sources suggest the difference often lies in the kind of work they're doing. The underestimated genius is usually building something foundational, like the underlying infrastructure, maybe new mathematical tools, new ways of thinking that the world just isn't quite ready for yet. The crank might be stubborn, sure, but their idea often doesn't connect to that deeper underlying shift that's maybe inevitably coming. The true genius is building for the world of tomorrow, maybe 10, 20 years out.
Which leads to something the sources point out that feels a bit counterintuitive. Why we might actually be seeing more of these figures emerge now. You'd think today, with instant everything, social media, constant metrics, the quiet types would just get drowned out.
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But it seems the opposite might be happening. Certain trends are actually creating fertile ground for them, precisely because they offer ways around that traditional validation system. The material highlights two big ones: decentralized work environments and these open source collaboration models. Think about decentralized work. It means they don't always need to navigate the politics or the funding battles of a big central institution, like a university or a corporation.
Right, they're insulated.
Exactly. Insulated from shareholder demands, from grant cycles that demand quick, predictable results. If you don't need the institution quite as much to do your core work, you don't have to compromise your radical vision just to get funding.
And the open source part, that lets them connect with like minds globally, right? Build complex things piece by piece.
Sharing code snippets, theoretical proofs.
Without needing some big official stamp of approval. It's like building a cathedral with a small, scattered team, totally outside the official church hierarchy.
That's a great analogy. It allows for distributed, complex work without central control.
Which means, for you listening, recognizing these traits is actually vital because it changes where you look for real influence, for the ideas that genuinely shift the world. It's not always in the spotlight. Often, it's tucked away in some quiet corner of a field most people haven't even heard of. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Let's talk about the seeds of disruption. If these individuals often reject the standard path, what do their early days actually look like? The sources mention this pattern of turning away from established norms, pursuing interests others just see as obscure.
Yeah, their early work almost never looks like the next unicorn startup. It often shows up as, well, seemingly minor projects, side hustles maybe, or proofs of concept that nobody really asked for. But those little theories, those small builds, they later turn out to be absolutely foundational for huge breakthroughs down the line. It's like they laid one perfect load-bearing brick way off in a corner of the blueprint.
And nobody notices that brick.
Nobody notices it until the building's half up.
Yeah.
And then they realize, oh, wait, the whole structure depends on that. Without it, it all comes down. And often, the sources say, their unique path got kickstarted by these little aha moments. Yeah. Maybe a chance meeting, something that sparked an idea. But almost always, people around them at the time just dismissed it.
They couldn't see the potential.
Right, because they were judging that initial spark against the world as it was then, not imagining how it could reshape the future.
And that period, the time between the spark and the recognition, that demands serious mental toughness. We're talking years, right? Sometimes decades, just plugging away quietly, experimenting, failing, far from any applause.
Oh, absolutely. That takes a unique kind of inner drive, doesn't it? To keep going, keep refining without that external validation loop.
Imagine working for 10 years on some fundamental theory, say in material science, and the top journals just won't publish it because it messes with the accepted ideas about, I don't know, crystalline structures or something.
It happens. That quiet dedication, that ability to just keep working when the consensus says you're wrong, that's basically their superpower. Resilience is key.
But they weren't always completely alone, were they? The sources do mention they often built these small, very loyal networks, not mainstream, but...
Right, not lone wolves entirely. They had an inner circle, maybe just a handful of people who got it, who believed, almost like that proverbial garage band, ignoring the radio hits, just focused on nailing their unique sound.
Until the mainstream finally catches up.
Exactly, and operating on the fringes like that, it didn't just shield them from pressure. It gave them a safe space to fail.
Yeah, that's important.
Crucial. If you're trying something truly radical, you're going to fail. Probably a lot.
Yeah.
If those failures happen within a small, trusted group, you haven't tanked your public credibility. You can keep iterating. That space for failure is essential for breakthrough thinking.
Okay, so we have this picture. The unconventional start, the quiet, internally driven persistence, maybe a small support network on the fringes. Now, what about the shift? When do they emerge from the shadows? What actually causes them to gain that widespread, sometimes profound influence?
This is what the sources call the tipping point. And it's usually not just about them finishing their work. It's more about the moment their work, that foundational stuff they've been doing, finally converges with something external. Typically two things: a real critical societal need, and maybe a key technological advancement that makes their idea suddenly feasible or necessary.
Interesting. So is it usually society suddenly realizing we need this, or is it more that the tech finally makes the idea practical?
Yeah, it can be both, but often it seems that technology maturing acts as the main catalyst. It forces the solution into the spotlight. Like, imagine someone developed a really clever algorithm 20 years ago, but the computers back then just couldn't handle it efficiently. It was purely theoretical.
Right, ahead of its time.
Exactly. Then, boom, computing power explodes, Moore's law keeps going, and suddenly that obscure 20-year-old algorithm becomes the absolute best, maybe the only way to build large language models or analyze massive data sets efficiently.
So the need might have been latent, but the tech unlocked the solution.
Precisely. And at that moment, their work, the stuff everyone ignored, suddenly becomes indispensable. The world realizes that this quiet infrastructure they built years ago, that weird theory, that niche code, is the missing piece.
The missing link needed for the next big leap.
You know, leading to widespread adoption, sometimes massive paradigm shifts across whole industries. And the irony, of course, is that the very person who successfully avoided the spotlight might suddenly become incredibly sought after, maybe even reluctantly famous. Their work gets pulled into the mainstream because it solves a huge problem, often in ways that ripple far beyond what they originally intended.
Okay, let's talk about those ripples. What does this mean for us, practically? The impact isn't just one product getting better, is it? It sounds more structural. The sources suggest they end up transforming entire industries, not just tweaking them, but fundamentally changing how they operate, the underlying models, even the governance.
That's right. And because their breakthroughs often provide entirely new capabilities, think new materials with impossible properties or completely new ways to process information, these quiet innovations can end up shaping global policy too, even indirectly.
How so? Indirectly.
Well, imagine a genius develops a new sustainable material that makes some zero-emission manufacturing process suddenly way cheaper and more efficient than the old polluting way. That discovery forces policy changes worldwide, right? Governments have to adapt regulations, incentivize the new tech. The genius might never talk to a policymaker, but their work fundamentally altered the economic and environmental equation.
Got it. So, connecting this back, it really reinforces that core idea. Their biggest impact comes from that long-term view, from working outside the usual pressures. They weren't trying to fit the market.
No, they were chasing a fundamental truth, solving a problem maybe years before the market even recognized it was a problem. They could operate where the market saw no immediate value, and that's exactly why their work ended up being so foundational later on.
This whole deep dive, it really makes you rethink the standard story of genius, doesn't it? Well, the source material really pushes us towards is redefining what we value, what we celebrate, maybe moving beyond just the visible success stories, the celebrity CEOs, or the heavily funded labs. The real legacy here seems to be the quiet power, diligence, deep thinking, that relentless long-term vision shaping the world behind the scenes. Those are the things that seem to ultimately move the needle, even if the people doing the moving aren't always easy to spot.
Which brings us to a final thought, really a question for you, the listener, as you go about your own work, your own thinking. We've seen how these revolutionary ideas can ascend quietly and the conditions that help them grow. So knowing this, how might you get better at spotting, maybe even supporting, the next potential silent revolutionary, the one working away on the fringes right now, whose idea might not fully bloom or change the world for another decade? Just recognizing that subtle power and maybe consciously giving those less obvious ideas the space they need to breathe, to build, to fail, and iterate. That might be the first step toward nurturing the next big breakthrough. Something to think about.